Bob Vanderplot's here from the Family Leader. Good to see you again, Bob. How you doing, brother?
I'm doing really well. And Steve, I was just talking to Aaron and Todd a little bit in studio. We're going to get you back in studio here sooner than later without all these wasps. But I was telling them
I've heard that one before.
I've heard that one before. As I go around and I travel, and this past weekend I was in Hershey, Pennsylvania, the sweetest place on earth, Hershey chocolate. And they gave us a bunch of chocolate, way too much chocolate. I need to give you guys gifts of chocolate. But you guys have got raving fans everywhere. This was a banquet of 1,500 plus people. And I had people waiting to see me because they see me on the day show, every Monday. But a couple of them, Dave with his son Alex, I promised them I'd give them a shout out. And then Jennifer with her husband Rob, I said I'd give them a shout out as well. But they are fans. It's interesting how they got on to the show though. Some it's through COVID. And some of them, they were Glenn Beck supporters, and then all of a sudden they found out, who's this Deace guy? But you're making a difference. So I want to say you're making a difference. I want to give shout-outs to Dave and Alex and Rob and Jennifer.
So Rob and Jennifer, Dave and Alex, thank you very much for the kind words. Check is in the mail, as always. Appreciate
you got 4
that.
listeners in Pennsylvania. You're on to something.
We do. I'm told this is a very anemic audience. So apparently the only people that listen just happen to be at all of your speaking engagements across the country.
You know, Darla said this. Darla said, Bob, everywhere we go, and we travel quite a bit, everywhere we go, there are good people. There's just good people everywhere. And they're nice, they're friendly, they'd be willing to help out. When you take a look at the audiences or the people that we're hanging around with, you're like, what could be wrong with this country? Because there's good people.
What could be wrong with this country is there's a podcast I'd previously never heard of called Call Me Daddy, which is basically a slutcast, and it apparently has a Joe Rogan level audience of women eager to give themselves to men who want nothing to do with them and will never care about them, to the point that even the vice president of the United States thinks that that's where and she's right, by the way, that's where she needs to go to get her message out. There's a whole other country out there, Bob.
Obviously there is. I've never heard of this podcast. Don't need to go to it. Don't need to listen to it or repeat it. But there has to be a whole nother country out there. Because, again, what we experienced in Pennsylvania is what we experience in every state across the country. We'll be in Wyoming next weekend. They're just good people. Anyhow, kudos to you. Kudos to the show for making such a difference.
Well, I appreciate that, brother. Thank you. So about a year ago at this time, you were getting ready to go to Israel again.
I was. As a matter of fact, I was in Georgia, and I think I even took a selfie with some people who are fans of your show in Atlanta, Georgia. But I was leaving Atlanta, Georgia, in the airport, and I could not believe how long the TSA pre-check line was. And remember, I was getting upset, like, how long can a TSA pre-check line be? I'm in a hurry. I want to get on that plane. I want to get home. It was a Saturday. And all of a sudden, both of my oldest boys contacted me almost simultaneously and said, Dad, have you heard what's going on in Israel? And I had not. And Steve, and you guys know that we take a delegation to Israel about every other year. Mm-hmm. And we're getting ready last year to take a delegation to Israel on October 20 to give them all the biblical sites, the geopolitical nature of the nation of Israel, those types of things. Really looking forward to the trip. Darla, who plans all those trips, were in the heavy throes of it. And then we got notified that Hamas comes in and they attack Israel. They rape, they murder, they behead, they burn the citizens of Israel. And my first thought, Steve, was this would be a flash in the pan. Hamas did something really stupid. Israel going to Gaza and just obliterate them, and then it's all things back to normal. We'll still go to Israel. And now a year later, you're seeing a war on multiple fronts of the nation of Israel. It's Gaza and Hamas. It's Lebanon and Hezbollah, all backed by a nuclear Iran. You got terrorists in Judea and Samaria, but all focus has got to be on Iran. And right now we need leadership. We need strong leadership to say, not only do we stand with Israel, we stand in Israel, and there's not a breath of separation between the two nations. Because they view, again, Iran views Israel as the little Satan. They view America as the big Satan. And because of going to Israel so many times, we have a lot of supporters there. a lot of people that we know there. And I just want to probably reiterate that our thoughts, our prayers, and our steadfastness remains with the nation of Israel.
I think, again, it needs to be pointed out because there's a wide swath of theological opinion in this audience. And as you get younger, you're kind of at the edge of boomer and Gen X at your age. On the younger end of Gen X and into the millennial era that Aaron represents within the church, there's much more debate over the prophetic significance of this iteration of Israel than exists in the older generation. And I think I'm fine with those debates. We've had different views within the history of the church on the nation of Israel and whether there needs to be another Israel, whether the church is the fulfillment or the replacement for it or not. Some great men in the history of Christendom have had varying opinions on this. And come now, let us reason together. But I also think it's irrelevant to this conversation right here. And here's why. For 1,700 years, there did not exist a nation state called Israel. Did not exist for 1,700 years. Actually, almost 1,800 years. Mm-hmm. And yet for about 1,200 of those 1,800 years, there was no nation state called Israel. There was something called Islam. And Islam waged war against Christendom right from its inception and always has, and had nothing to do with any association with the nation of Israel. The idea that a nation called Israel would even be allowed to occur again wasn't even in the mind's eye of power brokers in human history for almost 2 full millennia, until World War II. So Islam, the idea that our standing with Israel causes Islam to come after us, not true.
No.
Islam has waged war against Christendom when anti-Semitism, frankly, was a mainstream thought within Christendom for centuries. Islam still waged war against Christendom. So it's a dominionist religion. It seeks to spread the dominion of Allah. In all things, not just ecclesiastical, but in all things. And we have fought against this in the West, regardless of what our position on Israel is, or regardless of whether we think this Israel is prophetically significant or not. And we can have that theological debate, but ignoring the historical precedent and significance here is dangerous, because the same people and the same worldview that did that to Israel October 7th last year would do the exact same things to all of us. Exactly. And already has many times in our history, and would do so again, whether or not there was a nation about the size of New Jersey called Israel existing there within the Golan Heights or in that area whatsoever or not, because we already know from history that it did, Bob. It did.
The theological debate, you're right, Steve. I'd be happy to have that. I have a lot of theological thoughts on it. But I also take a look at it. It's just not theological. I mean, it's a place obviously where Jesus walked, where Jesus will return. It's you bless Israel, I'll bless you. You curse Israel, I'll curse you. All that stuff. I get the theological debate stuff, but just take a look strategically. And they're very clear about this. Israel is small potatoes to them. That is the little Satan. So strategically, that is a friend, of a Western ally in a hostile region. You want to stand with that, because what they want to do to Israel, they want to do to you. So you might as well stand with them right from the beginning.
Amen. So let's go to Pennsylvania, where you were this weekend. And we were discussing this a few minutes ago before you came on. Regardless of what you think of him or not, one of the most badass things I've ever seen in American politics. Not only was Trump shaking his fist while taking a bullet to the face as he's bleeding, and who knows if he's in shock? We don't know. I mean, he could be mortally wounded and just acting out with adrenaline and shock, and we get to the hospital later and find out that it's really serious. Like, no one really knows, all right? That entire day was a zoo, okay? But to return back there yet again to the exact same spot where he took a bullet to the face there on July the 13th. And then to begin his return with, as I was saying, absolutely one of the most badass things I've just ever seen in American politics.
Well, I think both politically and messaging-wise, it was brilliant. I don't know who came up with it, if he came up with it or if his staff came up with it. But Trump has a feel for the American people. He's got a flair for, what works, what doesn't work, kind of the stage presence. Like, you think you got me, I'll get you. I mean, that's all Trump, right? But what really hit me there is I remember when it happened in Butler, Pennsylvania, and he got up shaking his fist and, and yelling, fight, fight, fight. I thought right away, that's adrenaline. I remember when my father-in-law got attacked by a bear, and he got up like nothing ever happened. I wasn't there, but what I was told, he got up like it never happened, and that's kind of your adrenaline. He walked by that same spot 2 days later, he could barely stand because all of a sudden the reality sets in. So for Trump to act out with adrenaline, after when he got shot back in July, I think it was July, what was it, 12?
July 13th.
When he got shot. But then to go back there and to start off the remarks about, as I was saying, it's a message of fortitude. You are not going to push me away. I'm going to stand here to fight. There's so many messaging points in there that I got to believe just that appearance in Butler might be the tipping point of whether he wins Pennsylvania or not. I think it was a brilliant move by him. And I never even thought about coming up with the line, as I was saying, like, I haven't missed a beat.
So since you were in Pennsylvania, you had a chance to find out what the people on the ground there are thinking. There's probably going to be a lot of seasoned political pros in that audience, a lot of activists that kind of have their finger on the pulse of the state. Just so people just are reminded, it's been since 1988 that those northern big three Rust Belt states have not all voted together. That was the last time. George Herbert Walker Bush lost Wisconsin and Michigan, but did win Pennsylvania. That's the last. Since then, they've all voted as a block, including in 2016 when they all went for Trump. So what was your finger, pulse, finger on the pulse, ear to the ground as you were there? What did you hear?
Well, remember, as we stated earlier, I'm hanging out with one country. I'm hanging out with one part of one country. And they basically summed up what we've talked about on this show a lot, is that this is the biggest worldview election that we've had in our lifetime. Take the candidates out of it, Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. This is the biggest worldview election that we've had in our lifetime. Whether you'll have religious liberty or not have religious liberty, where you'll have parental rights or you'll not have parental rights, if you'll see an international stage on fire, or if you'll bring international leadership, meaning that the United States provides that type of leadership. So there's so much at stake. I mean, the whole transgender issue was a big topic of it. But what I actually saw there, Steve, it was from the audience, yes. But I also saw it from the pastors in the room. The pastors basically rising up saying, you know what, this is no time for our congregations to be disillusioned. Like, what does my vote make a difference or not? Your vote makes a difference. You need to show up. You need to be the timeless and prophetic voice to your culture by showing up at the voting booth. So it was by those who were in the audience, but it was also by those who were supposed to take the stage and those who did take the stage. The one that was supposed to take the stage was Governor Ron DeSantis. He was supposed to deliver the keynote address that night. But instead, he's still dealing with the aftermath of Helene and now dealing with the onslaught that they're projecting Milton's going to have. I think they just upgraded that to a Category 4 or Category 5 hurricane. So he's in the state of Florida where he should be. But he had like a 3-minute video that he shared with the audience and basically said, hey, Pennsylvania, I remember when Florida was you, when all eyes were on Florida. We were a toss-up state. And what happened is that we won and we provided bold and courageous leadership. And he went through the litany of bold and courageous leadership that they provide in the state of Florida and how Floridians have rewarded that. Now, right now, they're not a toss-up state. So basically saying the same thing can happen in Pennsylvania and urging Pennsylvanians to take that mantle seriously. So I thought it was a great message from a guy that was supposed to be the keynote who gives a 3-minute video address. But because of his absence, they had to get a keynote speaker. And for a while, I thought they must have forgot I was in town. But no, but Katie Faust wanted to be there to listen to Governor DeSantis. And they thought, you know what? Katie Faust should be the keynote speaker then, if DeSantis pulls out. Katie Faust started an organization called Them Before Us. This is a wife of a pastor, a youth group leader who's probably now, I hate to guess her age, but probably in her low to mid 40s, who's basically saying, that's all I can stand, I can stand no more. She reached her Popeye moment. She got involved, and she created an organization called Them Before Us. but it's about leadership, about standing in the gap with a culture that wants to take your children hostage and make them wards of the state and become any. She's saying, we don't do this for us. We do this for the next generation. And that's why Todd and Aaron and you and I, we do what we do. It's not just for us, but it's for that next generation. And Steve, what it really gave me a lesson on was leadership from Governor DeSantis, but leadership from an ordinary pastor's wife and mom who said, I'm going to stand up to make a difference. And I got to tell you, the audience gave her a thunderous standing ovation because it's an ordinary citizen doing extraordinary things of fulfilling what you're called to do.
Sounds awesome. Wish I was there. Sounds like our kind of gal. We should get her on the show sometime. So thank you, Bob. Always good to see you, brother. Appreciate it.
Good to see you. God bless. And keep praying and stay focused.